morning. My name is Neri, and I head a small think tank that does research for government. Just now, we evaluated, for example, the services for mapped and evaluated services for Bedouin children with disabilities. They live in half-nomad villages. I did a paper for here, which is the head of the planning in the Ministry of Welfare. So I did a paper on ultra-Orthodox youth turning secular, enjoying that transition. They become homeless. So we develop the government develops services for them. I evaluate these services, so I get to see the wonderful profession of social work without the responsibility, the caseload, or the salary that seems to be a problem all over the world. A second thing I want to say is that I was really moved by people receiving here the prize, and I want to say that I think the profession, looking from I teach social policy, but I'm not a social worker, unfortunately, but I admire social workers, and I think it's a profession that holds the high moral ground in society, and I think it shapes society more than we tend to understand. There is a concept of street-level bureaucrats, the people who really shape society. Our school teachers, nurses, and social workers are in the hottest spot in this sense. My surname is Horowitz, and the reason is Horowitz is a Czech name. 500 years ago, when my family was deported from Spain by Izraeli, we came here in 1512, and Horowitz is it's called Vyšší, a small village, a suburb of Prague at the time. So it's like coming home after 500 years. When I looked at the landscape, something I remember, though they never lived here, something in our genes maybe. It's a huge family today, 30,000 people who carry a Moravian name. I was thinking that about what's universal and what's particular in social policy, in the welfare state, in social work, because the welfare state is the setting of social work, especially in Israel, when the state is very strong. If the state moves in one direction, the whole profession moves to the same direction. So decisions made on services by the state shape the profession. So I was thinking, what is universal, and how can we really find something in common, or what's universal between Israel and the Czech, Israeli social services and social work, and your experience here. I was thinking in terms of what Kurt Lewin, a German Jewish American psychologist, said, that there's nothing more useful than a good theory. So the theory or the type of typology I'm going to use is that of welfare regimes. It was offered to us by a Scandinavian social policy expert called Esping Andersen, and he offered us the notion of three kind of welfare regimes. One was called the Anglo-Saxon, or the minimal liberal one. It's Britain. The second is called the conservative. It's the French and the German. And the third is more generous, more universal. It's the Scandinavian one. Later on, he added a fourth, which was like something that resembled Italy or Portugal, which was more religious, more loose in terms of planning. It called it the Southern European model. Now, there is a problem here with what you compare, because for Israel, first of all, the setting was very different of our welfare state, and I think that also the Czech was different, because the way I was taught in the 80s about the welfare state, it was capitalism with a human face. So what happened in Central European countries was interesting, but it was different. It was not part of what we conceived as the welfare state. I even remember that in the 80s, young communist students in the West said that the welfare state is inferior to what happens in socialist countries, for example, in terms of cultural policy, that is not part of the welfare state in the West, but in Central Europe and in Eastern Europe, it was a social right, getting free tickets to sports events, to the cinema, and so on. So putting together the Czech model and the Israeli model on the European model is quite complex. then I got even more humble from this attempt, from this effort, because I read, I looked at the articles, read only a few about from a project called by the Czech Institute of History. It's called The History of the Welfare State and Czech Social Work. If you Google in English social work and Czech, with the Czech system, you find out these 640 pages. It's a huge volume, and it's an attempt really to somehow write the historiography of social work, social policy, and the welfare state here in your system. And it's really not only a historiographical effort, it is also a welfare theory that somehow combines what happened here even between 1949, 1948 and 1989 as part of an ongoing process of improvement of welfare services. But I think it is also a project that attempts to build a bridge between the narrative, the European narrative, Western European narrative of the welfare state and the experience, the Czech experience. In this sense, we were far more lucky than the Czech, because Israel didn't resemble in no way the industrial capitalist societies of the West. But Israel adopted very early the British model of the welfare state. It was the Beveridge Plan, which was a plan that Churchill in 1943 published. He went to Lord Beveridge and asked him to prepare a system or a plan for what became a welfare state. And he lost the elections, although, by the way, because it wasn't enough for the British soldiers coming home demobilized. But the first language that was translated to was Hebrew. And the reason Ben-Gurion wanted it, our founding father wanted it to be translated to Hebrew, was to put an alternative to socialism. Socialism was a very strong ethos, and it was considered not hostile, but ambivalent, very ambivalent toward the welfare state. It was called the reformist welfare state. We are looking for more. We want a socialist society. So Ben-Gurion, in order to curtail, to somehow put a filter on socialists, went to the British model, though it was irrelevant to Israel. We were not industrialized, not fully industrialized. We didn't have a conflict, class conflict in the traditional sense. We were more like new states in the phase of nation building, and we were heavily dependent on import of capital. So what we did is we adopted the language, and when you adopt the language, the ethos and the blueprint of the British welfare state, that's the way it was structured. So in this sense, two different societies that have to address their differences in history, in ethos, in culture, to some model that they conceive as a model that serves best as a welfare state, as social services. And we adjusted through the using the imagination of the British welfare state, adapting the mechanism, the discourse. Later on, we took, when in social work, especially when Israeli PhD students went abroad, so we started getting American social policy. In the 90s, we got the American fashion. Israel was very exposed. Sometimes it was very hard to adapt, but Israelis were exposed to the Western welfare state. And though the setting was different, we managed somehow to adapt to it. I'll now go, this were my opening remarks, I will now look at the pressures of the traditional welfare state and the provision of the model of delivery. Provision of the welfare state, the traditional, we were in the traditional model of Europe, of Western Europe, and we got all the kind of pressures that other countries experience, other welfare states. First of all, we're being blamed for ineffectiveness in addressing social problems, stubborn social problems. For example, youth at risk, violence, personal violence in the family. In the educational system, why are we not achieving the European standards? Every welfare state has this kind of criticism laid upon it. And it's always, for example, now it's a lot about prostitution, because all the question of gender and sexuality is Me Too and so on. So suddenly everybody's asking how come we're unsuccessful, and the government addresses it by developing new services. The question of accountability and responsiveness. We have a unique demography have about 40% of the children under 18 are either ultra-Orthodox, that means the Jewish observant version with large families, 7 children in average, and we have a huge Arab population of 20%, more than 20%. So these groups conceive the welfare state and the social workers sometimes as agents of the state. Now, it took many years to build some understanding and trust between them. Lack of conditionality. The right wing claims that in Israel that the welfare state is too generous and the social workers are too soft in family violence, too soft on youth at risk. Inconditionality, for example, whether someone who refuses to take fasting over religious ideology, whether he can get children allowance. In Israel, if you don't bring your children there's a condition, if you don't bring your children to receive vaccines, then you don't get the children allowance, though it's only for a year. Lack of activization of dependency. Social workers, the welfare state wants people to be dependent, that's the right-wing criticism, and lack of activization, especially in the question of, in the issues of unemployment and low rates of participation in the labor market. Blindness toward identity, another kind of criticism laid upon social workers. On the welfare state, you're not enough, you don't understand enough the needs, and then you need mediators. For example, only rabbis, until recently, only rabbis could assist a social worker to get youth at risk out of their house, to take them under protection of the state. So that's also very complicated. Blindness toward gender also, especially gender, for example, Arab women and so on. Expansion of growth, that's the criticism from the Treasury. I think it's universal. The Treasury, departments of Treasury, the ministers of Treasury always claim that social work has this expansion built in. I'm thinking about, for example, mental disability in Israel has expanded dramatically. For example, there's for the first time, because the improvement of heart surgery, so people with mental disabilities used to life expectancies was 60. Today they reach 80, so there are no parents to support them. So now there's a service that prepares the family to move how to tell someone who has a mental disability that the parents have passed away, and how do we bring the brothers and sisters in as a family support. So the services growth, I'm thinking about autism, how it grows, all the special needs. So growth to the limit is something that puts heavy pressure on the budget. Criticism that one size fits all, a lot of it's personal in labor policy. It's obvious, don't offer us, they tell social workers, don't offer us these courses you're doing. Just prepare us better on my needs, evaluate me, take me there. We don't want these courses in training to become a chef or to become something else. Management of caseload and evaluation. Government in Israel, a lot of people claim, government, the press claims that social workers are very bad managers. There's something built in social work. The ethos of social work contradicts good management, and that's why you're ineffective. And here it's a problem. In Israel, it goes deep down. The neglect of prevention. You're always going for crisis. And why does the welfare state in Israel, it's very strong criticism. Now they're trying to change it in the last decade, that all the money is invested at the end, at the people who are really at risk, and not in the center where it's more needed. And neglect of material needs. In Israel, social workers cannot offer material support. From 1982, all material support of the welfare state is through Social Security. Before 1982, social workers had money, and they could offer, they had an envelope, and they could offer with criteria to give money to people that need, to their clients. We're happy that it's not there yet, but sometimes the needs of our clients are needs of material needs. Or promoting labor participation. For many years, Social workers in Israel said it's not our business to deal with labor policy. We support to protect them from the labor market. We don't support to impose people to enter the labor market in low wages and create the working poor. So all these criticisms are coming. Part of them are universal. Part of them are really particular. The wider context, Herbert talked about many of the things, so I'll go very quickly over that. We have a labor market that has a lot of inequality. Israel is a very successful economy because 6.5% of Israelis work in high tech, and they create a whole world of post-industrial. They have the one-man welfare states. They earn sevenfold more than any other Israeli, and it's like a popcorn machine. Yesterday, the government Israeli firm was sold for $3.5 billion. The government is going to get half of it in taxes. It could become a third of the budget of the welfare ministry could have been yesterday because this high-tech firm in Israel was sold to an American firm. It has huge impact. We're happy with it, but labor market inequality is a big issue. We call the 30-30-40 society. 40% are doing well, 30% are down there in the middle, precarious, what we call them. 30% are kind of an underclass with minimum wage. We have to give them, the government has to support them, and they are the working poor. Different experience of old age. When in Israel, life expectancy is one of the highest in the world, 82 life expectancy. The reason is we drink less alcohol. One of the reasons we smoke less and drink less alcohol, but 82. So there's a lot of pressure on the welfare here. And there are different experience in old age when some are protected, people who work for the state, people who are well off are well protected, and the poor the old poor are in bad condition, especially when medicine does cost money in Israel. Poverty concentrated among the ultra-Orthodox. Two groups, identity groups, it's also a social problem. Polarized labor market, we said about that, and we emphasize, I think everybody's doing that in the world, we emphasize the rate of participation over the quality of jobs, and Herbert was talking about that. I will go forward because I'm not sure about the time. What's the impact on the profession? I will go to the impact on the profession and we will leave the lifestyles aside. The impact on the profession is, first of all, value change and loss of confidence. 15 years ago, being a social worker in Israel, there was competition in the universities. People decided that they prefer social work over legal studies, over communications, and now we're not in a very good condition in terms of the demand. Teachers have become stronger. There's always an interplay between nurses, teachers, and social workers in Israel. You can see the movement, and nurses are now in a new phase in terms of technology. Teachers, the government supports them because they fear our educational system, whether it will be competitive, and the social workers, again, have loss of confidence. How much time I have? There's an ideological turn toward radicalism among social workers, some of them out of the state, working, promoting radical ideas. There's authoritative social work, people going to working in the departments that have to do with prisoners and so on. There's commodification of relationship with clients. There's not enough time to go over it. In the beginning of conditionality, it goes in general, the value change goes left and right at the same time, but I'm more concerned about the loss of confidence. In terms of governance, I always tell my students, go look at what happened in England, in Ofsted, the Office of Standards in Britain. This shaped the profession in England. In England, about 20% of the time of social workers is filling out papers to be covered legally, and there's a protocol that's social workers proof. This is what you have to do. This really does damage to what social workers do and how much they have the ability to make critical decisions themselves. There's a lot of pressure through standards. There's introduction of managerial models, shift to decision making into models. It reaches Israel, it starts just now, but in 5 years we're going to look like Britain, when everything is going to be standardized and there will be a procedure that you have to fill up and so on. It's really about accountability and about managerial models. And we don't know exactly how technology changes the social work. I think we need more time to understand what technology does to social work. But the impact on the profession is on value change, on governance, individualization. Individualization is more personalized services. There's an emphasis on identity, more responsiveness towards clients, participation of clients in decision making. There's still the therapeutic in Israel. The therapeutic is very strong. The social worker is someone who wanted to become sometimes a psychologist, and they told him, you really want to practice psychology, you really want to be in the therapeutic and have power, go become a social worker. And we have something unique because we are in conflict with the Palestinians under threats of war and terror. We have a new profession, therapeutic profession of resilience. For example, when Israel is under missile attacks, social workers open, and we're talking about hundreds of them, open what's called resilience centers, and it's a very interesting new field, this field in the therapeutic. The scope also changes. The scope of social works, there's more labor policy, more health, more old age. We have a new group, 18 to 24, which is a group of young adults. In Israel, we didn't need the policy to 18 to 24 or 25 because the army, it was obvious. You become an adult, and after the army, you're a full citizen. Between the ages of 18 and 21, everyone is conscripted into the army. So this is new in terms of less people, only 50% of Israelis serve full service in the army of young people at the age of 18. Arabs and ultra-Orthodox hardly serve in the army, and even among the other 60% of mainstream Israelis, only 50%, 70 or maybe percent serve in the army. So we need a new group of 18 to 24. Families, we avoided dealing with families. Then we understood that we neglected family. Family was considered something that it's very dangerous and right-wing for the government to deal with because it's family values and so on. We avoided that, but now there's a lot of need of that. More differentiated categories. For example, there's experts, social workers who are experts in sports for people with disabilities. There are people who are ex-social workers who are experts on investigation of sexual abuse with animals or dogs or so on. So the differentiation, when every university opens a new program for one of these specialized programs, so you see, and it creates a problem. On the one hand, you're an expert, you get your PhD for that or your master's degree. On the other hand, you want to be a social worker, you have to look all over the board. So it's very complicated finding the scope of the profession. There's also new places, and I've heard you have also your first social workers in the Minister of Interior. We have in the police, for the first time, what's called a police social worker. It's someone who takes women, for example, who have been abused or raped. The intake of them by the police is not done by policemen anymore, but by what's called the police social worker. Hospital wards, for example, in cancer treatment today, social workers are case managers of the family, and they participate completely with the doctors. Were always social workers in hospitals, but here they have in Israel now, they have special status. And the other impact on the profession is the agenda setting, and I've heard it even here today. The complexity of social policy and social work is such that the press and the internet cannot capture the complexity. We always come back in Israel. If we take the child out of the family, then you're social workers that snatch children. On the other hand, if you live him and he's been abused, where were the social workers? You're always guilty because the complexity of the issues are hard, and there is the internet and the age of fake news, as Herbert said. Moral panic is always there. Moral panic was happening like in Belgium with pedophiles, and in England in Baby P. It would happen once in 5 years. Today, moral panic is a daily phenomenon. And there's populist symbols. For example, in Israel, if you show a Holocaust survivor who lacks some service, then government is under tremendous pressure. Food insecurity, food is back. The Ministry of Welfare opposed food policy. They said that food insecurity is maybe a small problem for the homeless, but we need, for the poor, we don't need services like food. We need them to have good allowances and support them by social security. But the public didn't understand that, and there was a lot of pressure. And today we have a project that distributes food against the will of social workers and social workers, social departments. So, and also disabilities. In Israel, the rate of participation of people with disabilities in the labor market is very low, and government wanted to improve that, so they just tried to balance a little bit between the support for disability and labor incentive to participate in the labor market. And then hell broke loose. Wheelchairs blocked Israel for a week, and they received whatever they wanted. The government cannot stand when these pictures are on television, when this sets the agenda, government is under tremendous pressure. So, where are we heading? First of all, we talked about, I said I used the model of S.P. Anderson of welfare regimes. He also wrote in the year 2000 where social policy is going. He said, I don't know, but we need fog lights. Fog lights means look 10 years ahead. Don't look at eternity. Try to think what's going to happen in the short term. And in the short term, I believe it's going to be beyond left and right or big and small government. Government is going to come in because there are new places government is needed on the one hand. On the other hand, the pressure to privatization and having service provided by private firms will keep there. So it will be some combination between left and right, between small and big government. More the profession will change because there will be a lot of differentiation. We know more today about, and the people, new services will have to be learned. I see it in Israel that the question of resilience and how the community reacts to terror is an issue that they are going to open the first program. So it happens everywhere. It's the question of how, there is a course done by Israeli government in a school headed by who's going to speak after me, the course, how do you deliver the notice for a mentally disabled man at the age of 70, how do you notify him that his parents have passed away? It's a course, so that's differentiation. People will be experts in new specific fields. On the other hand, we will need more interdisciplinary fields. When we have now the first 10 police social workers, you see it's a new profession. It's interdisciplinary. It's a field in policy studies. They teach it under policing, so it's very complicated. New spheres of intervention, of course, I've said that. More fluid identities. There is, today we conceive identities in three ways. There is what we have, the typical identity, which was the 20th century identity. You belong to a group, you're a Protestant, you live in a city, you're an accountant, you have your identity. And there's identity that's more protecting itself, fundamentalist actually in a sense. The second form of identity is an identity that feels under threat. You see it among religious groups, you see it in the right wing, you see it among Trump supporters. And the third notion of identity is projects of identity. People defining themselves, you see them sometimes the way it's lifestyle and so on, being vegetarian, living in the woods and so on. These fluid identities, and sexuality is going to change here also, and there's diversity of life experiences. For example, in Israel, it's very obvious among the elderly. Elderly women at the age of 18 works today, still works over the age of 67. That's retirement age. She works because she needs the money. My mother is a professor. She works because she can choose that. Different settings in lifestyle. Less stable economic structures, we've talked about that. And I think it's all, in the end, it's about complexity of our profession and the blurred boundaries of the welfare state. And being a social worker will mean in the next 10 years living with complexity. Thank you.
Já moc děkuju a chci se zeptat, jestli jsou dotazy, sdělení, doplnění k této přednášce. Tak, poprosím pana ředitele.
Já bych se chtěl zeptat pana Horowice, jestli by mohl odpovědět, jakým způsobem je v Izraeli upravená vlastně profese sociálních pracovníků, jestli tam je vytvořena nějaká komora, nebo jestli sociální práce je nějakým způsobem vedená z úrovně ministerstva, nebo jestli v krátkosti, já chápu, že to je asi téma na dlouhý povídání, ale...
The next two lectures are exactly on that issue, and they will talk about the formal structure and how it is based legally. But the ethos of social workers is that their union that Herbert mentioned, the former head of the Union of Social Workers, the union is not, in my eyes, and maybe my colleagues will say something else, is not strong enough. It is on both issues. As a trade union, it's not strong enough. It didn't manage, though they had strikes and so on, they didn't manage to bring improvement to the way the profession is governed, and maybe there's something here to learn for other chambers. And the second thing is, I don't think they have a very strong voice in policy also. So they're very organized in terms of how they study, how they receive their license, and university is very important. They are trained well by government, but if I look in the larger sense, whether the Union of Social Workers is an important actor in social policy in Israel, unfortunately it isn't. The social workers are individuals, shape Israeli social policy, and they're doing tremendously well with really under tremendous pressures that I think no other country experiences this way in terms of identity and the pressures and terror and so on. But on the other hand, as a group, they're not very effective.